Winter of 1882. A blizzard lay over the land between two towns like a white sheet pulled too far. The wind did not let snow fall straight down. It drove it sideways, hard as sand, across rock and scrub. The wagon road vanished under the drifts. Sky and ground blurred into one color. The Western Star stagecoach pitched and jolted on a road no one could see. The driver held the reins so tight, his knuckles went white. The team blew steam from their nostrils, foam crusted around their bits. Each time a wheel dropped into a hollow, the whole coach shuddered. Inside the coach sat 4 people. On one bench, 3 young women pressed close together, cloaks wrapped tight. On the other bench sat a tall man, hat pulled low, coat worn but buttoned neat. He held a small cloth bag on his knees, as if everything he had left in the world was inside it. The girl by the window on the left had brown hair tied back, and brown eyes that were steady but not soft. Her name was Margaret Doyle, though most called her Meg. Her husband had died in a freight wagon accident, leaving her his last name and not much else. Next to Meg sat Clara Finch, the new schoolteacher. She hugged a thin book against her chest, like it was a small bit of order that the storm had not yet blown away. The third was Rose Talbot, blue eyes, red mouth, once a singer in a Dodge saloon. Today her voice was low and flat. "If this coach tips over out here," Rose muttered, her breath making a little cloud in the cold air, "they won't dig us out till spring." The man lifted his head. His gray eyes met hers across the cramped space. "The coach hasn't tipped yet," he said slowly. "As long as the wheels are still on the ground, we still have a chance." Rose tried to smile. "What's your name, Mr. Hopeful?" "Ben Carter," he answered. He did not add that he had once carried another name, tied to a string of robberies on dusty roads, and that Carter only came along when he laid down his gun and hired out as a hand. The coach climbed a hard ridge of snow and slid sideways. All 4 passengers leaned with it. Clara gave a small cry, and Meg grabbed her hand to steady her. Outside, the driver shouted. Then the coach lurched one last time and stopped. The wind slammed the sideboards like a big hand, trying to tear the whole box loose. The door banged open. The driver stuck his head in. His face was red with cold, his eyebrows crusted with ice. "Can't go on," he panted. "Up ahead the trail runs along a wash. If we slide off now, the whole rig disappears." "What do we do then?" Clara asked, her eyes big behind glasses fogged with breath. "There's a way station about half a mile from here," he said. "Whalen's place. It ain't fancy, but it's got a roof and a stove. Anyone who can walk get down. I'll lead the team in behind." Ben tugged his hat lower. "I'll go first," he said. "You 3 stay right behind me. Don't drift off. In this kind of wind, being 1 arm's length away is far enough to get lost." They climbed down. The wind hit their faces like thrown stones. Snow clung to hair and lashes in a single breath. The world was nothing but white. Ben bent his head, hand over half his face, and walked with slow, firm steps. The 3 women followed in his tracks, hands gripping one another, boots plunging deep, their breath puffing out in short gray bursts. No one knew how long it took. Time breaks apart inside a storm. At last, through the white, a low wooden building took shape. The tin roof rattled with every gust. A thin line of smoke trailed from the stovepipe. On the porch, a lantern hung and swung, its small flame shaking yet clinging to the wick. "There," Ben said, his voice hoarse. He climbed the steps and hammered on the door. "Whalen," he called. "We're passengers off the stage. Need shelter till this blows through." For a moment there was nothing but wind and the house creaking. Then a bar scraped. The door opened a crack. A short man stood framed there, one shoulder lower than the other. His eyes were pale and narrow, like dishwater after too many plates. He swept a quick look over the 4 snow-streaked faces, then peered past them into the white behind, as if to be sure there was no one else. "Whalen's place ain't a charity house," he said. "But if you've got money for firewood and you don't bring trouble, I've got 4 walls and a stove. That's more than you've got out there. Ben met his gaze. We only need one night, he said. But I'll tell you this. Tonight, the wind isn't the only thing that'll be looking for a way in. Waylon lifted one brow just a little, then swung the door wider. Warmth and wood smoke rolled out. The 4 of them stepped inside. The door shut with a heavy click behind them. The blizzard kept howling outside. Inside that small wooden house, a long night was closing in around them. None of them knew yet that the worst danger was not hiding in the storm at all, but sitting somewhere inside these walls. Inside Wayland's station, it was dark but warm. One big room took up almost the whole house. A cast-iron stove sat in the middle. A blackened pot hung over it. One side burned from years of use. Along the walls stood a few narrow wooden beds. A long table was pushed up against one side. The air smelled of wood smoke, damp leather, and old coffee. Wayland shut the door and slid the iron bar into place with a hard clack. Then he turned and looked them over. The firelight climbed up the lines around his mouth. Not kind, not cruel, just the face of a man who had learned how to keep his expression empty. Wet boots go by the stove, he said. No one wants to sleep next to the smell of thawing ice. Guns hang on those hooks. This station doesn't let strangers walk around with cocked iron on their hips. Ben followed his pointing hand. A few iron hooks were fixed into the wall. On one hung an old pistol and a leather coat. He hesitated just a beat, then unbuttoned his coat. He took out his revolver and laid it on the table, then a long knife after it. I'll hang the gun, he said, but I'd like to keep the knife, for cutting meat, not people. Wayland shrugged. So long as you remember that line, when the storm hits midnight, he said. Then he turned to the 3 young women. You ladies likely don't carry guns, he went on, voice flat. But if you do, now's the time to say so. If there's a shot fired in this house tonight, I want to know what corner it came from. Meg unfastened her cloak and reached into the inner pocket. She drew out a small pistol and set it gently on the table. I don't want to use it, she said. But on the road, if a woman doesn't have one of these, all she can do is run. Clara flushed. She had nothing but her book. Rose did not bring out any weapon either. She only tightened her hand on the small bag across her chest. Inside were a few cheap trinkets and one creased letter no one but her had seen. Wayland fed more wood into the stove. The fire popped and crackled. He set a pot of water on top. There's coffee, he said. It's not good, but it's hot. Help yourselves. I'll go look at the horse shed out back, if the wind hasn't carried it off. He pulled on his coat, opened the back door, and a slice of cold wind rushed in before the door shut again. His footsteps faded. Only the storm outside and the fire inside were left. They drew closer to the stove. Warmth began to creep through their frozen clothes. Margaret held her hands out to the flames. Her fingers were thin, knuckles standing out. Clara took off her glasses and wiped the fog from the lenses with her sleeve. Rose stood a little apart, her eyes moving around the room, to the door, to the bar across it. You said there was more than wind out there, Meg said, turning to Ben. What did you mean? Ben watched the steam rise from the pot. His voice dropped a little. Before the storm hit, he said, I saw tracks on the North Trail. More horses than you'd need for a regular coach run, and the boot prints were odd, worn down on one side of the heel. Same kind of gang I used to know wore out. Clara shivered. Are you sure they're following us? She asked. I'm not sure, Ben said. But this line has been moving money for the bank in Silverton these last weeks. They hide the gold in freight crates. Not many folk know it. But news like that always finds its way to ears that don't sit in church on Sundays. Meg glanced toward the door, recalling the heavy wooden chest under the coach seat. When she had climbed aboard, she heard the driver curse under his breath because it was so heavy. If they know, she said softly, they won't let a storm stop them. They'll wait for it. A storm pins us in one place. The room seemed to shrink around them. So what do we do? Clara asked. We can't go back out. And if we just sit here and they come, it's like sitting in a box. Ben looked around. One front door, one back door, two small windows with bars to latch them, a low loft overhead. First thing, he said, we bolt every door. No one opens up for anyone once it's dark, unless all of us agree. Rose lifted her brows. You don't trust the man who runs this place, Pum, she said. I don't fully trust anyone who lives alone in the middle of nowhere, Ben answered. Not when he's got wood for the fire and coffee in the pot, and 4 strangers show up with a coach full of cargo. In a storm, every person has a reason to open a door, or a reason to keep it shut. Just then, a faint tapping sounded on the wall. 3 soft knocks, then silence. Rose jumped and stared that way. What was that? Clara whispered. Wind throwing a branch against the siding, Meg said. But Ben was already on his feet. He went to the window and lifted the edge of the curtain. Outside, the world was still a boiling white. Yet in that blur, he caught a darker shape for just a heartbeat. Then it was gone. He let the curtain fall. His jaw was tight. This night is going to be a long one, he said. And if there are men out there, the worst thing we'll face won't be the storm. It'll be the moment someone in here decides it's better to open the door for a man with a gun than to stay shut in with their own fear. Night came down fast. Through the small window there was nothing but a solid wall of white. Wind slapped the plank walls and made the little house tremble. Waylon came back in from the lean-to, coat crusted with snow. He shut the door and slid the bar home again. Horses are tied, he said. If the shed blows off, they'll still make it to morning. Ben let his eyes travel around the room. We should look at the windows, he said. If somebody is out there, that's where they'll test first. He and Meg checked the 2 small panes. The wood was old and dry. Ben took a few boards that leaned in the corner and nailed them across in an X. Clara held the planks for him, her face so close she looked like she wanted to hide in the wood itself. Rose stayed by the stove, pouring hot coffee into the chipped enamel cups. Do you get many folks stopping here in storms like this? Meg asked. Not when the sky looks like that, Waylon answered. Last year a family got stuck here. When the storm cleared in the morning, the father didn't wake up. He said it the way a man talks about the weather, then tipped a little whiskey into his coffee. On a night this cold, you need something stronger in the cup. Ben pointed out the ways in and out. 1 front door, 1 back door, 2 windows now blocked. 1 loft, he said. We should set a watch. 2 awake, 2 sleeping. Nobody opens a door until they've called the others up. Clara nodded. I can take the first watch, she said. Meg touched her arm. Let me and Mr. Carter do that. You'll need your strength tomorrow. Rose said nothing. She sat down at the table, cradling her cup in both hands. In her bag, a folded paper pressed into her palm, its edge as sharp as a little blade. That letter had come to her 2 weeks earlier in Dodge. A man with his hat pulled low had set it on the table after she finished a song. For you, he said, in case you ever get tired of singing for drunks. In the small room she rented, Rose had opened it. He signed his name Eli Ward. He wrote that he would be riding the same line. Wrote that there was bank gold on the coach. Wrote that if a storm forced the coach to hole up at some lonely station, he would need someone inside who forgot to slide a bolt all the way home. No one has to die, the last line said. Just gold changing hands. You get a cut and walk away from the old life. Rose had folded the letter back up, half wanting to tear it, half wanting to keep it. In the end, she slid it into her bag. Not for the gold, but because for the first time someone had sketched a doorway that led somewhere other than cigar smoke and cheap laughter. Now, in the stove's orange light, every word on that page seemed to warm and burn with the coffee steam. You said you saw signs of a gang this afternoon, she asked Ben. You really think it's a bunch chasing the gold? Ben took a sip. There are tracks a man knows, the way he knows a hand that's written him before, he said. Those horses were keeping tight together, leaving room in the middle for someone carrying weight. Road thieves move like that. Regular folk don't think about the wind. Waylon glanced over. You rode with men like that once, he said. It was not quite a question. Long time ago, Ben answered. Not anymore. But I know this much. When a storm rolls in, men like that are gladder than honest ones. Storms push everything into one spot. The wind outside rose in a long howl. Then something heavy thudded against the wall. Clara jumped to her feet. What was that? She cried. Could be a branch, Meg said, though her eyes stayed fixed on the boards. Ben walked to the door and stood still, listening. A moment later, a knock sounded. Clear. 3 taps, then 3 more. Inside there, a man's voice called, torn by the wind. Open up! We're about to freeze solid out here. Clara turned to Ben, eyes wide. We have to let them in, she whispered. We can't just let someone die on the doorstep. Ben did not answer at once. He looked at Waylon. The station keeper lifted one shoulder. This place isn't a church, he said. But I don't like hungry ghosts hanging around my porch either. The knocking came again, harder now. Just 2 of us, the voice out there groaned. We only need a patch of floor. Please. Ben laid his hand on the door bar, then turned back to the others. If we open this door, he said, we have to live with that choice until morning. If we don't, maybe there's some poor soul out there. Or maybe... He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. Everyone in that room could see it. Open to the wrong men, and this little room was a shooting box. At last he took his hand away from the bar. Whoever you are, he shouted, get under the eaves and out of the wind. We won't open in a blizzard for faces we can't see. If you're still there at daylight, I'll come out. Silence held for a breath or two. Then a curse drifted in and was shredded by the wind. Footsteps crunched away through the snow. Clara turned her face to the wall. If they die, she whispered, how do we live with that? No one answered. Rose lowered her head. The letter in her bag seemed to grow heavier. She understood then that tonight it might not only be bandits who came knocking. That little wooden bar was being pulled back and forth by the fear in the room already, long before anyone's hand reached for the lock. The night crawled by like thick honey turning solid. The hand on the old wall clock clicked from mark to mark, every move a small, hard sound. Outside, the wind kept howling. Every gust made the tin roof shiver as if it wanted to tear free from the beams. Waylon leaned over and blew out one of the lamps. Oil isn't snow, he said. Burn it all up tonight, and tomorrow we'll be sitting in the dark waiting for the storm to quit. Ben nodded. Fine. You 2 sleep first, he said. Meg and I will keep watch till midnight. Then we'll wake Rose and Waylon. Clara started to argue, but her eyes were already heavy. A whole day of clinging to the jolting coach, piled on top of quiet fear, had turned her shoulders to lead. Meg steered her toward one of the narrow wooden beds. A schoolteacher needs sleep if she's going to shout at children tomorrow, she said softly. Go on, let us look at the sky for you. Clara gave her a tired little smile and slipped under the thin wool blanket. Rose lay down on the bed nearest the window, back turned toward the room. She still had her hand wrapped tight around the strap of her bag, as if the moment she truly slept, someone might slip in and steal the only scrap of future she owned. Ben sat in a chair near the door. He had taken the cartridges out of his gun and set it within arm's reach. The knife was back at his belt. Meg sat across from him, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands, dark eyes too restless for sleep. You think we're going to live through this night? She asked, her voice level. No storm goes on forever, Ben said. It's people who stay shut up inside one longer than they have to. Meg stared into the fire. I used to think losing my husband was the worst storm I'd ever see, she said. Turns out here in Kansas, there are plenty of other things waiting to swallow you up besides wind. Ben didn't answer. He knew that look people got after a loss. The one that saw straight through wood plank and the body of the man who would never come home, hunting for whatever pieces of themselves were left. Around midnight, when the heat from the stove began to sink, Ben stood. "Time to trade places," he said. He walked to the bed, touched Rose's shoulder. She jerked awake. "Your turn," he said. "I don't plan to leave Waylon on watch by himself." Rose pushed herself up and pulled her coat close. Her eyes slid toward the station keeper. Waylon was crouched by the stove, stirring the coals, his face half lost in the orange light. Meg tucked the blanket higher around Clara, then lay down on the nearby bed. Ben rolled his coat under his head for a pillow. His eyes stayed open a while longer before slowly closing. Rose stood near the door, hugging her bag to her chest. Waylon handed her another coat. "Put this on," he said. "Tonight's colder than most." Silence settled again. Just the crackle of wood and the tearing sound of wind clawing at the walls. Rose could hear her own heartbeat louder than the clock. In her bag, the letter felt like a small stone growing warmer and heavier. "Do you believe," she said suddenly, "that sometimes the folks out there deserve to come in more than the ones already sitting inside?" Waylon's mouth twitched. "I believe that," he said. "But I also know when a storm's up, nobody keeps track of who they let into their house. Open the door for the wrong man, and you'll sit and regret it the rest of your life." Rose bit her lip. "What if that man is the only chance you'll ever get to leave the life you're stuck in?" "Any road out of anywhere has a price," Waylon answered. "The real question is, do you mean to drag somebody else into paying it with you?" He stood and straightened. "I'm going to check the store shed out back," he said. "Won't be long." He pulled on his coat, picked up the lantern, and slipped out the back door. His short shadow stretched across the floorboards and disappeared when the door shut behind him. Rose was alone with the steady breathing of 3 sleeping people. She reached into her bag and pulled out the letter, opening it in the glow from the stove. "No one has to die." The shaky line showed itself again. "Just one door left unlatched. You'll get your share. By morning we'll be far from that town that used you up and tossed you aside." She thought of all the nights she'd stood singing, the saloon owner counting his money, all those hands brushing past her hips, the cheap promises. No one in that room had ever once asked where she wanted to go. "You awake?" Ben's voice came softly behind her. Rose jumped and folded the letter shut. He hadn't dropped fully into sleep. He sat up, eyes narrowed in the dim light. "Everything all right?" he asked. Rose shook her head too fast. "Nothing's wrong," she said. "Go back to sleep. I just keep hearing the wind." Ben watched her for a long moment. Then he lay down again, but his eyes stayed open a few extra minutes, as if trying to remember exactly how she looked, hiding something in her hand. Time dragged on. The night grew thicker. When the clock struck 2, 2 dry little clacks, Rose heard something else. 3 soft taps on the back wall, exactly the rhythm he had written in the letter. A pause. Then 2 more. "Rose," a muffled man's voice came through the wind. "It's Eli. You still want out of that old life?" Her heart jolted. She glanced around. Ben had rolled onto his side, back to the door. Meg and Clara were still, wrapped in shadow. The whole house breathed in one slow rhythm. Rose walked to the rear door. Her hand found the wooden bar. It was only an old piece of timber, a single turn, and it would swing free. "Just open up," the voice outside whispered again. "No one will ever know it was you. The wind will carry off the sound of the shots. By morning, the money will have you far from all those sneering faces. You really want to stay here forever?" She closed her eyes. In her mind, the faces of drunk men blurred together with Clara's gentle one, with Meg's tired shoulders, with Ben's steady gray gaze, The man who had put his gun on the table the minute he stepped into this house. Rose whispered to herself, "No one pulls you out of the old place for free." But her hand still turned the bar. A dry little click broke the dark. The back door opened just enough for one shadow to slip through. Then another. Cold air rushed in, along with the smell of wet leather and the sharp scent of iron from their guns. "Good girl." A man in a wide-brimmed hat breathed right behind her. His breath brushed the back of her neck. "Now let the menfolk handle the rest. All you have to do is stand out of the way." Rose stepped back. Her chest felt colder than the storm itself. She understood in that moment that she had brought a killer in with her own hands, and the road out of her old life had just swung shut behind her. There was no walking it backward now. The back door opened just a narrow crack, then closed again. The wind was shut out by the plank wall, but a leftover breath of cold still slid across the floorboards. Two men stood in the dark. The first was Eli. Rose knew him by the tilt of his head and that thin smile at the corner of his mouth. The second man was taller, broad in the shoulders, a rifle already in his hands. "You did fine," Eli whispered. "3 asleep, 1 to open the door. Even a blizzard has to bow to us." Rose felt her feet nailed to the floor. "You wrote that no one would have to die," she said quietly. "Just take the gold and go." Eli shrugged. "No one has to die if everybody behaves," he said. "You just stand to the side." The man behind him moved fast toward the nearest bed. He grabbed Clara and yanked her upright, the rifle barrel jammed against her temple. Clara let out a thin cry, still half in sleep. Meg jolted up, her hand freezing halfway toward the small pistol on the table. Ben had never fallen fully asleep. The minute he heard the bar move and strange boots on the floor, he was awake. When Eli swung his gun toward his bed, Ben rolled hard to the side. The first shot slammed into the edge of the table, splinters of wood flying. Ben came up at the far side of the room, both hands spread at chest height, eyes locked on the 2 gun barrels. "What do you want?" he asked, voice low but steady. "The strong box under the coach," Eli answered. "This route carries more than ladies' dresses. We're just taking what the bank sent to the wrong place." Ben's eyes slid toward Rose, saw her hand still resting on the latch. He understood, but he did not say it out loud. "The chest is still under the freight," he said slowly. "In a storm like this, hauling it far won't be easy. In the morning, the bank's men will be back. That's why I need the whole night," Eli laughed once. "Tonight we tie you up. Tomorrow we lead out the horses. Simple." Meg stepped forward half a pace. Her face was pale, but her eyes were very clear. "You think you can drag a chest of gold through white snow and no one will notice," she said. Eli frowned. "Talk less, widow," he snapped. "You should be glad I haven't picked someone to stay behind." Overhead, a plank in the loft creaked, like someone shifting their weight. Rose knew Waylon had come back and was stuck up there, caught between the storm and the sound of guns. The next moment came faster than a breath. Waylon's whole body dropped from the loft opening. He threw himself straight onto the back of the man holding Clara. They crashed to the floor. The second shot went wild, the bullet only tearing a line along a roof beam. "Now!" he rasped. Ben lunged at Eli. The third shot went off close enough to sear his ear. The bullet grazed his arm, hot and biting, blood soaking into his sleeve. He gritted his teeth and used his full weight to drive the bandit down into the floorboards. Meg grabbed the kettle of boiling water off the stove and poured it over the other man's wrist. He screamed, dropped the rifle. Waylon jerked his arm up behind him and snatched a length of baggage rope that was hanging on the wall. The room turned into a tangle of harsh breaths, rope scraping, boots dragging. Only Rose stood frozen by the table, her small pistol lying right there beside her, the letter in her pocket like a burning stone. Eli managed to twist halfway up. His hand closed around a knife on the floor. His eyes locked on Rose. "Get over here," he hissed. "If you don't, They'll be counting bodies tonight, and it'll be on you. That line yanked her straight back to nights in the saloon, to mouths that promised plenty and paid little. This time, if she stood still, it wouldn't just be her paying the price. Meg's voice cut the air, short and sharp. "Rose, the gun." For the first time, she said the saloon singer's name like someone on the same side. Rose lunged, snatched up the pistol. The barrel shook in her own hand. She pointed it straight at Eli. "That's enough," she said, voice rough but clear. "No one else takes orders from you tonight." Ben was still pinning him to the floor, breathing hard. "Don't shoot," he said. "We've heard enough gunfire for one night. Let him live to face the law. You don't need another ghost in your head." 2 heartbeats went by, long as a whole winter. Rose turned the barrel and squeezed the trigger at the oil lamp hanging by the door. The glass shattered. Flame went out with a hiss. The room dropped into darkness, lit only by the dull red glow from the stove. In that dim, Ben pressed Eli down with everything he had. Waylon pulled the rope tighter. Meg grabbed another coil and bound the second man at the foot of the loft ladder. When a different lamp finally flickered to life, the 2 outlaws were lying on the floor, arms and legs trussed, rags jammed in their mouths, breathing hard. Ben leaned back against the wall. His shoulder had torn his sleeve, blood stained the cloth, but his eyes still held a half-smile. "Worse than a good night's sleep," he said, "but better than lying out in the snow." No one argued. They were all wrung out, but they were still alive. Rose sank into a chair. She pulled the letter from her pocket. The paper had gone soft and limp. She held it out to Meg. "I'm the one who opened the door," she said hoarsely. "If, come morning, you all want to turn me over to the law, I'll go. I know what I've done." Meg skimmed the lines, then let out a long breath. Her eyes softened. "You pulled the latch," she said slowly. "But you were also the one who shot out that lamp. If not for that shot, chances are we wouldn't be sitting here to blame you at all." Clara came to sit on the other side and laid her small hand on Rose's shoulder. "I teach children," she whispered. "I know there are mistakes a person has to remember for the rest of their life. But I also know if you nail someone to one wrong thing and never let them move, they'll never grow. You pay it back by living different, not by handing more keys to men like him." Ben nodded, his gaze steady and kind. "If you want out of the old life," he said, "stop letting thieves hold the key to your door. Tonight proves you've got courage. From now on, use it for yourself." Outside, the wind still cried along the roof, but inside the wooden house the heartbeat of the living slowly settled. They lay down and dozed in snatches, beside 2 trussed men and coils of rope that reminded them of the price of one opened door. Morning broke bright and strangely clear. Snow lay deep and clean around the station. Sunlight flashed off every roofline. The coach driver came back with 2 guards from the bank. Their eyes went wide when they saw the 2 bandits tied up neat in the corner. The gold strongbox was checked and then loaded onto a different coach. Ben was asked to ride back so a doctor in town could stitch his arm. Before he climbed up, he turned to Meg. "You still plan on taking this route on?" he asked. Meg looked down the white road, then back at the room where they had stood shoulder to shoulder all night. "I still have to get where I'm going," she said. "But if you need someone who can make coffee and change a bandage, I don't mind riding the same coach." Ben smiled. "Traveling together beats traveling alone," he said, as much to himself as to her. Clara hugged Rose tight. "You can head any direction you like," she said softly. "But from tonight on, you're the one holding the key to your life, not the men who write pretty letters and big promises." Rose nodded and turned to look at the station's back door. This morning it stood wide, letting in clean light, not a shadow slipping through a crack. "Next time somebody knocks," she said, half joking, half serious, "I'll ask if their heart's clean before I look at what they're carrying." The storm night at Wayland's stayed with them like a mark in time. A night when they learned danger doesn't just stand outside and pound on the boards. Sometimes it whispers in your own head saying, "Nobody's going to die if you lift the latch." And it was the night they learned that even when you've opened the wrong door, you can still choose to slam it shut and stand close together till the storm passes. Sunrise washed over the little wooden roof. Snow shone white and bright. 4 young people walked off on 4 different roads, each carrying the same quiet truth. From here on out, they would be more careful about what they let step across the threshold of their lives. If tonight, listening to this story, you caught a glimpse of yourself somewhere in it, in a door you once opened for the wrong person, I hope you'll stay with these slow Western tales a little longer. Go ahead and subscribe so that each evening, when the world outside grows a bit quieter, we can sit together under an imagined porch roof and share another story of life and love. Tap like if you believe everyone deserves the chance to shut an old door and open a new one for themselves, and leave a comment to tell me, have you ever had to learn how to keep the key to your own life out of hands that didn't deserve it? And if you don't want to miss the next journeys of healing out among the blizzards, the red dust, and the hearts that seemed worn out, but still know how to stir, turn on the notification bell so that whenever a new story begins, there's always a seat waiting for you by the Western fire.